As scientists warn about global warming, climate change could pose serious risks and opportunities to corporations around the world. So how can those companies protect themselves and maybe cash in on the changing climate? Joining us is Paul Walsh, Senior Vice President at Atmospheric and Environmental Research. Paul, great of you to be back with us. We started digging into it earlier in the week, but talk about the four types of risk that you're talking about that companies face.
Well, there's of course the physical risks that are associated with climate change, which specifically speak to the warming weather and the drying weather and sea level rise and things like that that have material impact on businesses. There's also regulatory risk and legal risk as well. And we're starting to see more and more sort of regulations coming down on businesses where they're being mandated to actually disclose what these risks are coming forward and actually putting in place plans to sort of deal with them. And most specifically in the insurance industry, where the NAIC has actually mandated all insurers greater than $500 million per year to actually fill out a disclosure so that people can look in and commissioners for sure can see how they're dealing with these risks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul, I know a lot of the climate change people that are critical of it, they say, well, look how cold it is, that kind of snicker and say global warming is more about water temperature than air temperature, right? I mean, so whatever is going to happen in 50 years, we do know this. Sea levels are rising, and we've seen all these crazy storms the last few years and weird weather patterns. If you're an insurer, that's got to be extremely hard to manage your risk for.
It is, and the way that we approach climate change is we look at it and we work with companies to help them understand the science and to understand how the climate is likely to impact their specific business or their book of business, including insurers. And the one thing that we can all say about climate change is there's a lot of uncertainty about what's really going to happen downstream. And so what you really need to do is you need to build scenarios where you can sort of understand what's the best case and what's worst case and build plans around there. And that's basically the way that large companies, both insurers and also financial services companies, are looking at the future and sort of figuring out the probabilities and working that way.
Apologies, Paul. Sit right there. I just want to bring our viewers some breaking news that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been taken to the hospital after experiencing extreme drowsiness falling from a seat on an airplane. Supreme Court saying that Ginsburg was found to be in stable health, and she was released from the hospital after staying overnight. But she was taken to the hospital after experiencing extreme drowsiness, falling from the seat on an airplane. But the Supreme Court saying that she was released after staying overnight, and she was found to be in stable health. And we will bring you more details about Justice Ginsburg as we get it. Paul, apologies for interrupting you.
No problem.
But speaking of regulation, the SEC is beginning to look at requiring all companies to at least assess the impact of climate change. I mean, what kind of what kind of burden would that be, though, Paul, on all corporations in this country?
Yeah, you can look at it as either a burden or an opportunity. And from an opportunity perspective, as the climate is changing and businesses are being affected, to the extent that that a company can sort of get a handle and understand how that's going to affect their business, there's opportunities to innovate and opportunities to create new services or change the way they approach the marketplace. In terms of from a burden perspective, it's probably similar to other disclosures that companies have to make. So from an investor perspective, if you're looking to invest in a company that has a large footprint in fossil fuels, for example, the idea of doing this disclosure is to give you as an investor material information about how climate change may sort of pose a risk to that company downstream. Big companies like Walmart are really taking a lead in this, and Walmart's developing a sustainability index with their vendors. And are really leaning forward on this issue. And I think that's a great example of a company that's looking at this not necessarily as an issue or a burden, but actually as an opportunity to create new value for their customers as well as their shareholders.
Well, Paul, I mean, Walmart, what? I mean, I don't know. I mean, Walmart, can they really be sustainable? I mean, can they be? Everybody wants to be green, right? Everybody promotes the green. I mean, how much of their stuff is made in China? China, the most polluted big country in the world. Everything is shipped over here on giant freighters, trucked across the country, huge stores, thousands of cars in the parking lot. I mean, Can that really be green? I mean, listen, they're probably your client. You're not going to knock them, but at the same time, I mean, can a company like Walmart really be green? I mean, can anything other than local, sustainable, buy right around you, drive less, be green?
Right. Yeah, and I'm not trying to be a shill for Walmart, but just in terms of the approach that Walmart is taking, the leadership approach and the size of Walmart is such that I think that it will actually have a material impact. And what they're asking their vendors to do, by the way, is to actually report the greenness of their product. And the end game and where they hope to get within the next few years is that all the products in their stores will have a tag, basically a green tag that actually shows how that product or what the footprint of that product is. And I think really their intent is to get their vendors thinking about innovating and creating new kind of products that will both create sustainability, but more importantly, from a very pragmatic business sense, create additional value and additional products or new kind of products.
Are we going to be, I mean, I know we got to go, but I mean, are we going to believe that, a manufacturing plant in, Guangzhou, China is going to put that label on? I mean, who's going to label that? How do we know?
I think that this process is meant to take several years, or I mean, maybe even up to 5 years, but Walmart is a big player, and they have a lot of influence. So we'll see how that all works out.
I'm glad you're watching it for us. Paul, thanks a lot.